What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Today we're going to be talking about embracing the spirit of play on the streets. The art of street photography has nothing to do with the compositional technique of putting together a frame. I actually think that street photography is very nuanced. I feel as though when you're on the streets, the philosophy behind why you're photographing and how you're photographing and what you're photographing are a result of who you are as a human being. And what that means is when you're on the street and you're embracing this sort of childlike spirit of play and you're out there in the world open and curious without any preconceived notions of what you will find, this is to me where you will become surprised. You will become surprised by life's beautiful gifts. Where when you're on the street and you're photographing, these moments that are coming towards you, they're gifts. The gift of photography is the fact that when you have a camera in your hand and when you're out there photographing with curiosity at the forefront, all of these complex moments and details and things that we are looking for in our photographs are not a result of our observation. They're a result of our heart, of our spirit, of that inner childlike curious spirit. And I find that when I think of the word courage, courage meaning heart, core meaning heart, a photograph becomes a reflection of my courage, of my heart. A photograph is a reflection of me positioning myself on the front lines of life, close to humanity. And at the end of the day, the photograph is merely a reflection of my lust for life. And to me, that's what it's all about. It's about embracing life closely, both physically and emotionally. As much as a photographer is responsible for positioning themselves in a particular way and timing that decisive moment and putting together a foreground, middle ground, and background and cohesively describing a moment through the photographic technique of composition, there's something more to this game of going out there and practicing street photography than just the technical side and the capability that you possess as a photographer. I think that we need to set the cameras aside. We need to set the compositions aside. And we need to take a deep dive into our own mind, into how we perceive and feel about life. Because at the end of the day, when you're on the streets, you're on the front lines of life. Okay, so let's go ahead and how do you make this not be like that? Whatever, I guess the camera's fine. How do you make it so it's not there you go. Oh, no. It's okay, whatever, it'll be vertical today. All right, so the spirit of play. The spirit of play is ultimately how I've made my photographs. The reason why I make my photographs is because I have an abundance of lust for life. I love life. I love humanity. I'm so joyful when I'm on the streets. I'm not out there in the world as this serious documentary photographer, on the hunt for the next photograph. I'm a very playful person. And so this scene here in a refugee camp named Shu'fat in East Jerusalem was beautiful. I approached the scene as soon as I walked through the gates. When you enter this community, it's actually very daunting, right? You would go into this community and you would think you need to be serious. There's a big looming wall that's separating this community from the rest of Jerusalem. So there's about 100,000 Palestinians that are living within these walls. And every single day, if you want to enter into their community, you have to go through a checkpoint. And so I'm going through the barbed wire fence. I'm looking up at this huge wall. I'm putting my bag through an X-ray machine. I'm looking at the Israeli soldier and nodding and smiling and showing him my American passport as he questions me. I get into this situation right away. I'm entering Shu'fat. This is one of the first places that you stumble across when you enter Shu'fat on the left-hand side. If you go there yourself, check it out. It's very serious to enter this location. It's very serious. But deep down inside me, I'm just this childlike, curious person. I'm just a big kid with the camera looking up at the wall, wondering, what's in here? What is this place? In all honesty, that's the truth. And so here we have a scene that was beautiful and playful. These men were gathering watermelon and loading the truck, selling their produce. And as I engaged the scene playfully, the man started to play himself, right? And this is something that comes through openness. This is something that comes through seriously going in there without any preconceived notions of what you will find, without any prior research. You're just wondering what's in here, why, what is this, how. And actually in the background here, every single day I would go in here, I would have a falafel at that exact falafel stand. Guess what? The Palestinian falafel is better than the Israeli falafel on inside the Shuk in the Mahane Yehuda market. Their falafel's better. I don't know what they add, but it's cheaper and it's better. And so actually I was just pulling up in ChatGPT, and that's just the facts. Every time I want falafel, I would go there. I would literally go into a refugee camp to get falafel because it was better. That falafel stand deserves more recognition. So I have here a behind the scenes. So I was using ChatGPT to send me the video to do some prior research. And actually when I used the ChatGPT, it mentioned something interesting. So I have this behind the scenes. So it was around 2017. It was around 8 years ago or so. And I was photographing with the Fujifilm X Pro 2 and a 23mm lens. And so the 23 f2. And I had the GoPro Hero 3 on top of my camera using the hot shoe mount. And I was interested in just sharing some behind the scenes at the time. And so actually when I asked for ChatGPT to send me this video, what's interesting is it mentions that it highlights the cultural significance of watermelons and Palestinian solidarity, which is something I'm completely unaware of. Like I had no idea what this means, but as you can see in the bottom, it says, in Palestine, the watermelon has become a symbol of resistance. Following the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel banned the display of Palestinian flag in its colors, red, green, black, and white. In response, Palestinians began using an image of watermelons, which share these colors, as a form of protest and cultural identity. The symbolism has persisted, with the watermelon representing Palestinian solidarity and resistance. And they give you this Wikipedia page where it showcases the watermelon as a Palestinian symbol. Had no idea. I mean, maybe this is a thing. Look, you can see the flags, the watermelon. I had no idea. Oh, there's a watermelon sculpture at the roundabout in Jenin. I was there. So yeah, that is something that, like, I'm literally just learning 8 years later, honestly. And I think that's maybe interesting, just a note, right? When I'm photographing, I'm not thinking in my head about cultural significant things. I'm not thinking in my head about very specific nuanced details of this place as this journalist that's looking for specific moments and looking for specific things. If anything, the one moment that I was looking for and the reason why I was entering this particular location was because it was a place where I knew that I could photograph the looming wall. And so I'm giving a bit of a behind the scenes here just through my own curiosities and exploring this ChatGPT. But we're going to go ahead and watch the behind the scenes so you can see how this photograph was made through my playful interaction at the scene.
Hi. Is it okay if I take a photograph of the, yeah? Shukran.
So when I approached this scene right away, I could sense the possibility of a photograph. You have the beautiful colors from the green watermelon. There's such a great streak of light there casted upon the wall in the background, the truck. You know, there is something here. You approach a scene and you sense the possibility. So I'm looking at the light and shadow play. I'm looking at the vibrant colors. I'm looking at the people in the movement, and I'm studying both the patterns in nature with the light and human behavior with the gestures and the way that they move. And so when you approach a scene, you sense the possibility of a photograph. And through play and through your curiosity and through patience and through the art of observation with your sharp visual acuity, you make the photograph and you chip at life. You take a picture, you readjust, you move closer. And sometimes through that gut reaction time and that patience, things pay off and something spontaneous may just happen.
The sun, it's beautiful.
So as you could see, I moved around at the scene. I moved around the umbrellas. I moved around the stand. And I was trying to look and find a new vantage point, trying to see what can I do here. But then, of course, I come back to the thing that caught my eye initially, which is the watermelon and the vibrance of the color.
And the green color, nice, yes. What time do you eat? Ramadan? Not now? Okay, after 12, wow. I'm from America. Yes. Trump? Maniac. Yeah. Yeah, he's crazy, a little crazy. A little crazy. Yeah. In America, I live in Philadelphia. Yes. Oh, nice. Oh, cool. Miami's beautiful. Força saída.
And there, all right, and there we go. All right, so there's a few things to note about that behind the scenes video that could maybe be of interest. Playfulness pays off. Embracing the spirit of play, not being afraid to interact at the scene, not being afraid to chat with strangers despite the cultural barriers and the language barriers. When you go into a new community, you don't just go in snapping. You don't go into these places and just start taking pictures like you're in downtown Manhattan in New York. When you enter a place like this, you must be open. You must be somebody who's not afraid to play, to speak, to interact. And using body language, using simple gestures like looking at the watermelon with my hands and trying to describe that I'm just interested in photographing this beautiful color and this beautiful scene. They understood my intentions. And so I don't need to communicate so much verbally, but honestly, through your body language, through your gestures, and just through your facial expressions of smiling and being playful, the people in the frame that I photograph wind up understanding why I'm making the photograph, and they can tell that I'm playful. And so this is something really important in my philosophy on how to make photography like this, is really honing in on that childlike curiosity, that spirit of play. And this is something that I've carried with me all throughout the world, and I believe is the result and the reason why I have been able to make these photographs. And so here we have the result of the image here. This is the photograph I wound up making. You could see the man, after having a quick interaction, he just spontaneously picked the watermelon up and put it on his head. And it was a fantastic moment. And now one of the things that we talked about initially when observing the behind the scenes is how I was observing the light. I was aware of the light here. I was aware of the shadow play. As I was speaking with the man, I could notice how half of his face was covered with shadow, half of his face was in the light. I could see the way the shadows were playing on the face and the background and the different things that were casting on the truck. I noticed the color of the watermelon. I'm very keen with my observations when I approach a scene and have this understanding of the different elements that can combine to break the frame up, to give the frame more interest. And so as the moment occurred, I am prepared there with my camera, ready to respond with my gut intuition. And so at that moment, when he lifted the watermelon up, I knew with certainty that that was the decisive moment to press the shutter, and all of the pieces aligned. As you can see in this particular frame, the way in which I observed the light actually paid off exactly how I imagined it to be. Because what happens is when you observe life, things become something that you can control, right? Like what's interesting is like light is out of our control. The way that the light is casted here at this triangle, right, by his face is something that's actually kind of out of my control. I can't really control the fact that the light is going to cast on his face in that particular way at that particular time. But by observing and understanding the nuances of the particular scene with the way that the shadows are casting, I was able to almost force that control to the chaos of light itself. But yeah, there's a couple of different like little elements in this picture that make it dynamic and interesting. Like you can see my shadow here, the shadow of the truck, of course the light and the colors of these watermelon here, very much so make visual interest in the frame. And then having a person in the background right here help to set the stage, with this gesture of the hand, giving a very dynamic sort of feeling to the composition where your eye can then spiral around from the man in the foreground to the background to the watermelon and then back again. And so you can have a composition come together like this very naturally, but this honestly comes through intuition and the spirit of play. And so at the end of the day, I think that we need to follow our joy as photographers. When you follow your joy, when you follow your inner childlike curious mind and that spirit of play, that will reflect back in the photographs you make. As much as I can show you with my little marker how I decided to make this composition, I think really, really, really honing in on your personality and the way that you are as a human and how you interact with life is going to do wonders in your photography. It's going to be the reason why you can make these kind of pictures. And so there's numerous examples that I can show you where the spirit of play paid off. I mean, frankly, what I think is wild, look at this. I made this picture on June 11th, 2017, and then I made this picture on August 15th, 2017. So when I look at my keeper ratio, it was about 2 months in separation until I made my next best picture. So that next best picture wound up being of more watermelon. There's something about that. It's kind of interesting. But during this trip, when I was in Napoli with my brother, I wasn't here to photograph. I was relaxing and we were swimming and enjoying ourselves for multiple hours. And through the spirit of play, of interacting with the locals and having a casual interaction with the people, I wound up making this photograph. And I'll never forget at that moment, right? We went into the water and the man on the right-hand side that's holding the foreground element together, he was actually like peeling off live fish from the rocks and like feeding me like live, like raw, like alive, like fish or something, like some sort of shellfish. I don't even know what it was, but it was really interesting and just salty and good, I guess. I don't know. It was fun. It was just a nice experience. And so I think it's actually interesting to note actually the seriousness of that location that I photographed in. The seriousness of Shu'fat refugee camp, the seriousness of the looming wall and the environment that I'm photographing in. And despite that seriousness, we see reflected in the photograph a very joyful moment. And here at this scene, it was a very playful moment, but the photograph feels a bit more serious, right? And so there's something about the way that I interact with life that ultimately is the reason why I'm making these photographs. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, this photograph came with a whole day of just hanging out, right? Similar to the watermelon that you just saw from Napoli. I made this photograph after hiking without water. I had no water bottle. This was crazy. I hiked for hours and hours, from morning to evening, from sunrise to sunset, all throughout the desert of Jericho, with my friend Muhammad in the background and Ahmed in the foreground. And at this moment, we were just relaxing, swimming in the water, and he turned around with a cigarette in his mouth, and I snapped the shutter. And it's a very serious moment. It's something that's maybe a bit more serious. But through the spirit of play and hanging out and being playful throughout the day, I was able to make a photograph that way. And so one of the things that I've become very consistent with is photographing the youth and photographing the joyful energy of the youth in the world. And this is something that comes through play. Like this photograph here of the family outside of this home in West Baltimore was very playful. And I was very playful. And at this scene, at the end of it, I actually gave my camera to one of the kids to let him take pictures of me. He was curious. He was like, "Oh, let me play with your camera." I asked for permission from the mother. The mother was trying to get these kids inside to go and start bathing, but because I, was just there and just happened to be there at the right time, I was able to make this photograph of that chaotic frenzy and put order to the frame. And so, again, this all comes through the spirit of play, through interacting on the streets, to being open and just being honest with my process. And the photographs that we make in this spirit of play will reflect that joy. And so these are just some of the ideas I have about the spirit of play and why it matters. I think that when you go out there in the world, you should not take it so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously. I think when you're playful on the street and you engage with life this way, you'll be delighted with the frames that you can make. Here in Mumbai, I was walking around Bandra, and the area around Bandra was a slum. And this area in the photograph I made was on a railroad, this very gritty scene. But despite the location and despite the life in the environment that I'm photographing, I photographed this very joyful moment, this very innocent, playful moment between the mother and the daughter. And I find that this photograph is a reflection of that joyous time I had walking throughout this area in the city. This is a reflection of not only the joy of the girl in the photograph, but also the joy that I had at this time that I pressed the shutter. And when you're out there and you're open and you're honest and you're playful, that will reflect in the photographs you make. And actually, I think I believe I pulled up. Maybe I don't actually have it pulled up. Oh, because we were watching this one here. But I can actually find it. The behind the scenes, I believe it is. Assalamu alaikum. Hey, it's okay? For me? Thank you. And so there you go, right? I'm walking through Bandra, being playful, being open, making photographs, making friends. These kids on the left of me are following me around. I remember walking through the alleyways and watching as they were playing PUBG on their phones, and I was talking about the video games and just being playful. And then these kids actually, as they walked around with me, drew attention to the scene, and a lot of the workers in the shop saw me. And then when I approached this shop, I was curious to make a photograph, but as I was making the photograph, the man at the scene working there was actually so generous enough to just give me free coffee. And so then I get the coffee, I have the coffee, and I go in and I sit down. And what's interesting with this approach is you will be delighted with these gifts of life. When I travel throughout the world, I'm always open and I'm always eager to interact at the scenes and get closer and closer to life. And through that closeness, and through not only the physical closeness, but that emotional closeness of genuine joy and curiosity, you will be delighted with these things. Where I've had food, snacks, coffee, tea, all throughout the world because of my openness. And I think that's just important to note as it comes through this not so serious approach, but just being playful and curious. Very good. Very good. Assalamu alaikum. Tea is good, the chai is good. Very, very, very good. I like. And so you could see at the scene when I sat down across from this stranger, with courage at the forefront, you have to be courageous and open, and to go into these places, it does require, some courage, right? And being close to somebody and making their photograph requires courage. But I'm also playful, gesturing to the coffee, and I'm telling him how good it is, and then he goes to sip his coffee, and then I raise my camera and I make a picture, and then we move on and we keep walking, and I think I wound up at the railroad. And so one of the things I look for when I'm photographing are groups of people. I look for a scene. I look for something that has potential in a photograph. And so when I approached this scene very playfully, they were all just sort of sitting down. And when you have subjects that aren't necessarily moving, a lot of the times that allows you to make more compositional decisions in the framing, where you can really fill the frame with all different sorts of things going on, from people's simple gestures alone, of the girl looking up and the man looking at the girl, and the man in the left-hand side or in the middle of the frame looking to the right. You know, there's a dynamic that can happen despite the lack of movement when you have permission and you interact at the scene playfully, that can help you with making these kind of compositions. It's okay. Very beautiful. Thank you. And so there's the behind the scenes of that photograph, where, you know, I approached the scene asking for permission, and then ultimately make the image, right? The girl was very shy, but just through that playful energy began to smile. And, you know, of course I was smiling too. And it's almost like you're egging on the scene in a way where, you know, your joy reflects back in the photograph. And I think this is the perfect photograph to end with, because it does reflect that lust for life that's within me. It reflects that joy in life generally that's out there in the world. And I think when you follow your joy, when you follow that inner childlike spirit, when you embrace that spirit of play and you don't take yourself so seriously, you will be surprised with the frames that you make. I think photography, as much as it has to do with putting together a composition and understanding how to utilize your camera and knowing all these different techniques and all this kind of stuff, the photographer is responsible for positioning themselves on the front lines of life, close to life. And that's going to require openness. That's going to require you to be in embodied reality. That's going to require you to genuinely enjoy life and to enjoy being out there engaged with the world. And to me, that's what it's all about. It's about having fun, being playful, and following your joy. And then ultimately, that will reflect back in the photographs you make. A photograph, it's a reflection of your courage, of your heart. A photograph is a reflection of your lust for life. And so that's just a little bit of my mindset behind the photographs and how I approach certain scenes playfully. And so hopefully you can go out there and fuel your lust for life through the use of street photography. Peace. Thanks for watching.